Okay, today we're going to do something a little different. This is not a war game related application, but something else. I'm going to show you an application that I've named TaskShrew. Other names I considered were Overlord, Overseer, Taskmaster, and TaskBitch, and a number of other even less polite names. So what is TaskShrew? It's not an organizer or a scheduling application in that you can't use it to schedule something for a particular date and time. It doesn't pop up reminder notifications. It's also not really a project management app. Instead, it's a daily productivity tracker. So let's say your objective is every day I want to spend X minutes on task A, Y minutes on task B, and so on. And the application allows you to create lists of tasks and time targets for each, and then track the time you've spent on each task. So let's see it in action. This is just a sample task list that I've created. Let's go over the basic features. Like I said, it displays a list of tasks that you want to devote time to each day. It also shows the allotted time, in other words, the target time for each task, and then the amount of time you've actually spent on the task. Some of the basic interface features, the application always stays on top. So let's say I open up another window. The TaskShrew app will always be the top level window, but you can minimize it if you want and then maximize it again. The basic functionality is simple. You select a task, you click the start button, and this taskbar activates, and as a little timer runs in the background, and as you work on the task, the progress bar eventually gets over to 100%. This 0 will gradually increment from 0 up to 30. This field updates once a minute. This updates in a little more granular fashion. At the bottom, in addition to the current taskbar, you have the total allotted time. So all of the allotted time for all of your tasks. In this case, for this list, it comes out to 300 minutes. You have the total amount of time expended on all of your tasks. So you can see this is just updated to completing 1 minute of the task, and so this updated to 1 minute. And the last field tells you the completion percentage for all of your tasks. So right now, 1 is less than 1% of 300, so this won't show anything. But once this counter gets to 3 and this gets to 3, this should update to show that you've accomplished exactly 1% of the 300 minutes of allotted tasks you have for the day. You can also pause a task. Let's say your phone rings and you got to go take a call. You just pause it. You can see the task bars, the progress bar is currently disabled. The timer pauses. In addition, let's say that the phone rang and you got up to answer it and you forgot to hit the pause button. And so the timer has been running. Well, there's this button because we're all human. You press reset and it allows you to reset the time to whatever you want. And the reverse is also true. Let's say you started in on a task and you forgot to hit the start timer, and you estimate how much time that you spent on it, and you can use the reset button to correct things. Of course, this all depends on the honor system, because there's nothing to stop you from saying, hey, if I want to say that I completed all 3 hours of my software project today, well, you can just cheat. Set it to 180. Voila. So now I'm already up to 64% task completion. What a great guy I am. When you do complete a task, you get a little pop-up notification. I suppose we could set this to 19 minutes. Start the task, and we'll eventually get a little pop-up box telling us that we've completed the task. Something you've probably noticed, these numbers don't line up nicely in a column. That is because I am using a proportional font for the text here. Actually, we could exit the application for a sec and I'll show you. The default font is a proportional font, but I could probably fix that by just rebuilding the application and setting it to a non-proportional, a monospace font like Consolis. We have to make a couple of changes over here. We'll recompile and rebuild. And you see now it all lines up nicely, but you kind of have these ugly, Consolis is kind of an ugly font, but let's just stick with that for the time being. So, like I said, this is just a default task that I created for this video. But if you want to create your own lists, you can open the editing function, add a task name, set the time you want. You can also set the priority. Let's set it to low, and voila. Currently, anything that's at a high priority is in bold. Low priority or a slightly lighter typeface. I really need to work on that and come up with a better solution, because it's not so easy to distinguish low priority tasks from medium priority. You can also rearrange the order of tasks just by simple drag and drop. If you want to open a pre-existing task list, simple, you just do that. There's a new list that I had previously saved. Now, how did that get in there? That should not have been there for this video. So let's temporarily take this out. If you want to save a task list, you can save it under a different name. There are a few other features. You notice there's a little tooltip pop-up that informs you can right-click a given task to add notes. So it's important to note the way I've written the current application, it's important to note that these notes are really intended for intraday use, so they don't persist. Like if you were to save this task list, these notes don't persist, and when you shut down for the day, the notes don't persist. So they're really just intraday reminders. When you exit the application, it saves a number of things. So, for example, if I close it and then restart it, it always remembers where you left it. So if I close it and then reopen it again, it'll always be positioned where you had left it at the end of the prior session. Also, the name of whatever list you currently had open, the name of the list will be saved, and when you reopen the application, it'll automatically look for that previously open list and it'll reopen it for your new session. In addition, when you close the application, it saves your daily performance data. So in other words, it saves it in CSV file format. So it'll save the date, and for each task, it saves the amount of time that was allotted to the task and the amount of time you actually expended on the task. Now, since we were just messing around, there's a whole bunch of meaningless entries here. So you can see as I was working on the application the last few days and opening and closing it, so new rows have continually been added to this this data file, but they're all basically meaningless because there's virtually no time expended in any of them. Once I start using this application in earnest, hopefully I'll get some real data. And this feature isn't ideal because it's really for a specific list. I mean, let's say you put together a list of tasks that you want to accomplish, and you use that list for a couple of weeks, and then you decide to either change the list or create an entirely new list. The different tasks, the tasks will differ between the two lists. So how do you harmonize the data the data sets between those two or more different task lists, it's kind of awkward. What the application does is when, on exit, it looks for a CSV file with the name of the current task list in it, and if it finds it, it opens it and just adds another row to that file. But if it doesn't find a CSV file with the current task list, it'll create a new CSV file and start saving the data in that new file. So that's kind of a kludge solution. I added this feature because someone requested it, and that certain someone knows who they are. In addition, another quality of life feature is that there are tooltip pop-ups, as well as the the ability to add notes. And as you noticed, the note that I'd added here was not saved along with everything else. So there are a few arguably missing features that I might add. Currently, you cannot edit an item in place. If I want to change this, I can't just double click it and start typing and change the name or change these values. Instead, I would have to delete it and replace it with a new task. And, it's not a big deal. I mean, it's not exactly a lot of typing, but, just a convenience feature. Would be nice to be able to just edit something in place. It would also be nice to display the name of the task list file, either in the title bar or maybe somewhere over here, just out of convenience, so the name under which you saved this current task list, or maybe I should say the name of the task list that you have open. It would also be nice, as I mentioned, when you add notes, these notes don't persist between sessions. It would be useful perhaps to split the notes into two categories, one that does persist and one that's just intraday. That could come in handy, so that's something I'm considering adding. I might also include a Pomodoro timer. If you don't know what that is, it's a technique where typically you might use a 1 hour cycle. You spend 45 minutes working and then 15 minutes just relaxing, doing something else, and you use a timer. And supposedly it is corroborated by neuroscience. Apparently your brain's not great at just working for hours on end, so it's a way of maximizing cognitive function. So you work for 40 minutes or 45 minutes, you set a timer. When the timer goes off, you take a 15-minute break. You set the timer for that. When the timer goes off, you do another 45-minute work session, and so on. So I could integrate something like that into this application. It would be a little bit difficult to harmonize the Pomodoro intervals with the separate timers that relate to accomplishment of these tasks. But it's just on my my list of possible things to do. The most important feature that's missing from this is linking it to a shock collar that I put around my neck, because there's absolutely nothing, if I'm not sitting and working, there's nothing to stop me from wasting time. And the whole point of this application is to help me be productive. So I really need to find a way to get a dog shock collar that I have to wear and then maybe connect to it with Bluetooth or something and have the application zap me when I'm not being sufficiently productive. And just to close this out, there is something supremely ironic about this application in that I wrote it to help me be more productive, and I found over the last couple of weeks I've been wasting time working on the application itself, adding features that are nice but not necessary. I mean, this thing was in a working state 10 days ago at least, and now I'm just wasting time every day working on an application that's intended to help me be productive. So that is supremely ironic. Not to say that, not to even to mention this video on which I'm using time instead of being productive. So just to wrap things up, I may end up putting the source code for this on GitHub. We'll see how that goes. And as always, thanks for listening. Hey there, I just wanted to make this brief addendum to the video to show a couple of features I've added or changed. So let's start the application. This is just again, a made-up task list. In the original video, I was talking about how I wanted to resolve the display for low, medium, and high priority tasks. So I ditched the bold type and the lighter shade of type, and I went with these icon sizes. So the lightest blue, smallest disk is low priority. The medium shade and medium-sized disk is medium priority and high priority. I'm not 100% sold on this. Maybe the high priority should be very light color and larger disk, but whatever. This is fine for now. I also took care of the that formatting issue where the columns weren't lining up by changing the nature of this control. This used to be a list control, and now it's a tree control. And the items in a tree view can have multiple columns. That's what I did here. This is actually a second column, so I'm just relying on the framework to line things up nicely. I think that in the final version, I'll probably take out this header, because if you look here, if I uncomment this header view will be hidden, and I think I probably like that better because it's really not necessary to tell a user what these individual things are. But in any event, that's where we are. I may make some changes to this in the future, but thanks for listening.